Hey everyone, welcome to the Ask an Architect show. Now, you may remember this guy, Mr. Nick Serfass. So, Nick, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, my name's Nick, Executive Director of the AIAS. I'm also an architect. Prior to AIS, worked at NCARB, and before that I was in practice in healthcare for a while. Been with the AIS for almost 5 years, and it's been a blast. So that's a quick rundown. I'm sure we'll get into more.
Cool, man. So, how did you get into architecture school?
I'm not really sure. That's a great question. Still questioning it myself. Actually, I have a politics background and ended up working for a law firm for several years after college, actually. And thought I was going to go to law school and that was going to be my path through life. But I was talking to a bunch of young attorneys at the firm I was working for. Most of them were miserable, and all of their advice centered around whatever you do, don't go to law school. So I had taken one architecture class my last year of college. It was really cool, loved it, and I ended up calling up that professor and saying, can you help me get into grad school for architecture? I think I want to change things up a little bit. And so that led to me going down to the University of Miami, and I did a 3.5-year MArch down there.
Cool. So, how'd you end up becoming the executive director of the AIA?
Man, I don't know if Tim has enough space on that memory card for this.
Oh, there's enough. There's enough.
Worked in practice for several years. It was in healthcare, which, you know, on the surface of it, isn't the sexiest sector to be in. You know, a lot of people don't really get attracted to that initially, but I fell into it and really loved it. And loved what I was doing. It was highly technical, really complex work in a hospital where I thought I was making an impact on people's lives and building what I thought was very functional architecture. And things were going great. And I had started an internal mentoring group at the firm I was with. And it was a large local firm, and we ended up applying for a national award with AIA and with NCARB. And we ended up winning the IDP Outstanding Firm Award back in 2007-ish. And through that, I got to meet some folks at NCARB, and one thing led to another, and I ended up going to work for NCARB for about 6.5 years. While I was there, most of my time was spent going around to colleges and universities and talking about how to become an architect. So I've actually been on campus at over 75 different schools,
Oh, wow.
talking about what the process is to becoming an architect. And what I found was most successful was being relatable and being authentic and telling stories about the process, rather than just saying, here are the steps along the way, you got to check off box A, B, and C. And that seemed to be really successful and seemed to be really impactful at the same time, and got to meet a lot of folks at AIS along the way, a lot of students. And when the AIS job came open, it seemed like a natural fit to move over from my role at NCARB into this role, because I was working primarily with students anyway. And so that's what got me here.
So, in your long path to this position,
Yeah.
have you missed practicing at all?
No, I haven't, but I think there's very unique, specific reasons related to me that why I don't miss practice. I think that coming from another industry and not always I didn't start out in architecture from day one. You know, I didn't go to undergrad for architecture, and so I've always felt a little bit like a stepchild in the profession, in the sense that I came into it laterally, and it wasn't something that was innate to me. And so once I got into architecture, I started to realize the things I was really good at were the construction administration items, the working with clients, the working with contractors, the coordinating with consultants, and that type of thing. A lot of project management work. And I wasn't a designer per se. I didn't love being in front of a screen, making design choices all day long. I wasn't super confident in design choices. And so for me, that world isn't where I fit naturally. It's just not innate to me. Whereas this world, being out here talking to you, talking to other people, creating relationships, and you know, managing really cool projects like AS Forum or AS Grassroots, or running an office, that's really rewarding to me. And so going back to work on an architecture project doesn't speak to me as much, but I think that's because that's where my background is, and that's you know, that's where I'm comfortable.
That's great, because you know, we've got a lot of students out there, as you know, that don't always go into the profession. So
Yeah.
It's good to hear an alternative career path. So I see this fancy pin you got on.
Yeah, man.
The FAIA. So could you explain a little bit about that award?
Sure.
Because I'm sure there's a lot of students that don't know what it is, and then elaborate how you were awarded yours.
Yeah, sure. The F of FAIA stands for fellow, and it's a real wild process. Essentially what it does is it attempts to acknowledge folks who have made an impact in the profession through the work either in their career or through volunteering, or in whatever way they've impacted the career and the profession of architecture. And so in order to apply for it, you have to have certain benchmarks. You have to have been in the profession for so many years and been an AIA member and all that kind of thing. But most significantly is you actually put together almost a little mini biography of yourself. It's a 40-page document about everything you've done for the profession. And you have to sell yourself. You have to say, I did this and it made this impact and this is why I should be a fellow. And so not only is it a great award and it's cool to be acknowledged, but the process of putting that together and really looking at your career and the steps along the way and then analyzing it and then storytelling it really is reflective and makes you appreciate what you've done and your past. And I think not a lot of us get the chance to do that, to really sit back and think about how far we've come and what we've done along the way. And I think that's the most rewarding part of this process, is not that you get the award or you get the pin or you get the status. It's that you've had a chance to look back at your career and take some self-reflective moments and appreciate what you've done. And it doesn't stop with that either. Obviously, I'm still in the middle of my career and I hope to do a lot more. But it's a fantastic process. It's a really cool community within the AIA. I've gotten to know a lot of new people that I didn't know previously, and I'm looking forward to where it'll lead for the next half of my career here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, talking a lot about the past, let's change it up. And where do you see yourself in the future?
Yeah, going back to that point you mentioned about there are a lot of people out there, a lot of architecture students who maybe aren't 100% sure they want to do traditional architecture or even architecture at all. And that's what I think is really cool about the architecture degree, is that it's so diverse and allows you so many different opportunities and so many different pathways. And I think if you really go out and explore and taste a bunch of different things, that you might find there's something else really cool out there that you're really passionate about, maybe you're really good at, or you really just like to do, that maybe isn't traditional architecture. And that's okay. And honestly, I think that's where my career is going. When this airs, I'll be leaving the AS to assume a new position with a technology council. And for me, the technology space is really attractive. I think there's a lot of growth there, obviously. I think we're in an age where technology is making huge leaps and bounds for society as a whole.
Absolutely.
And I think being a part of that is a really neat opportunity. And I also think it's interesting that as an architect, I'll get to apply my design thinking and my design sense to another sector. And I think a lot of sectors see that as valuable. People outside of architecture really value what an architect brings to the table. And so keep that in mind as you're out there pursuing your career. Even if you do traditional architecture when you start out, always keep your opportunities and your options open and, see what else is out there, because there's just so much. So taste everything and find out what you like. And so for me, I think it's going to be technology for a while and see how that goes, and hopefully it's successful. But I hope to continue to make an impact in whatever I do.
That's fantastic. Yeah, passions are something that the current board of directors always talks about. Mike Chiappa, our current Northeast Quad Director, is very passionate about graphic design. Myself, I'm into photography. It's my hashtag or handle on Instagram. And there's all sorts of things. Paul Bamson, our South Quad Director, is also big on tech. So you're absolutely right. With the future, man, passions and design thinking, it's all fantastic.
It's exciting, but it can also be scary as hell. If you're somebody who's in architecture and all you've known is architecture and all you've done is architecture, it can be a little freaky to look out and say, I'm going to go take a job somewhere else in animation or entertainment or technology or something else entirely. It can be a little scary because it's not your comfort zone. But I would encourage folks to embrace that, because that's where I think you can really find your passion. And you can really be excited about your career and create an adventure for yourself. I mean, life's an adventure, man. So, go out there, live it, and try something new, even though it might scare you a little bit.
Speaking of adventures, talk about some of those marathons that you've been running.
Yeah, so I have a sickness, so I don't really do anything just a little bit. It's always all or nothing for me, and it just seems to be the way that I live my life on, socially and personally. So I do these 100-mile ultra marathons. I run one, or I attempt one, I should say, every couple years or so. And what happens is I'll train for 6 months, run a 100-mile marathon, and then I will literally take at least 6 months off where I won't run at all. Like, go to the gym, sleep a lot, eat a lot, not paying attention to anything too heavily, because it takes a lot out of you too.
I would imagine.
Just to train for that. And and I don't start training for another one until I'm super motivated and I'm like, all right, it's time to do it again. And, going back to being scared about things, I'm not always successful in things I do. And the 100-mile marathons are a case in point. I've attempted 6, I've only finished 4. It doesn't always work out exactly how you plan. And sometimes you're not as successful as you hope, and that's okay. You learn things, and then you just apply it the next time you go out. So, yeah, it's something I do. It's kind of my thing. Can't really explain it. I don't really love running at all, to be honest with you. It's more about the adventure. It's an overnight thing. You're running through the mountains. You're staying awake. It's more of tackling a big, hairy, audacious goal more so than it is about running.
That's fantastic. So last question to kind of give people something to look into. So if you don't follow Nick Serfass on Instagram, you should. He always reviews a bunch of books. So what is the most influential book you've read?
Yeah, the most influential book I've read is a book called #AskGaryV. And I'm glad you asked this question, because I think it brings this entire show full circle. So this show is the #AskAnArchitect show, which I modeled after the #AskGaryV show, which is also a book. And the biggest premise that I think I've learned from Gary Vaynerchuk, the author of this book, is 3 simple words. And that's, you're gonna die. And at the end of the day, that should motivate you to do anything you want to do, to not be afraid to try anything, to do your best at all the time, to give yourself a break occasionally, and to live your life to the fullest, because at the end of the day, we've all only got one shot at this.
Words to go out on. Well, everyone, give it up for Mr. Nick Serfass. Thanks again for everything, Nick.
Yeah,
Good
thank
luck
you,
with
Adam.
where you're headed in the future.
Appreciate it.